G'day, we're going to have a look at some trigonometry. So the first thing you learn in trigonometry is you look at right angled triangles. And the first thing you deal with is you've got theta, and they throw theta into a bunch of triangles and they say label the triangles with 3 letters. And the 3 letters they want are O, A and H. So this is opposite, adjacent and hypotenuse, and they want you to label that for every triangle, so they get your brain used to looking at a triangle and thinking, what is the position of those 3 letters in response to this? So let's do that a few times, bearing in mind that's opposite, that's adjacent, and that's hypotenuse. What do they mean? Well, opposite is in reference to theta, and they call this theta the angle. You can call it anything you want, but they usually use theta. You could call it apple, banana, it doesn't matter. They're referencing opposite in reference to that. So what is opposite that? Well, this side here. The hypotenuse is the thing that's opposite the right angle. So the longest side is opposite the right angle. And adjacent, well, adjacent means next to. So if you're adjacent to someone, you're right next to them. So which one is next to that? Well, this one. Bearing in mind that you know the hypotenuse is also next to it, but that's opposite the right angle. So if I was labelling this triangle, I'd be saying, well, that's opposite, this is adjacent, and this is hypotenuse. Now, what would be good for you to do is if you paused, had a look at those and tried to label them as fast as you can, and then unclick and see if I get the same answer. So here we go. Hopefully you've paused. So let's look at this one. What's opposite? Well, that's opposite, so that's going to be my O. What's opposite the right angle? Well, this one is the longest side, which is the hypotenuse, and adjacent. That one's next to the angle, that's adjacent. Let's do this one. There's the right angle, that's hypotenuse, that's the longest side, which is opposite that. Which one's opposite this? And that's the other thing you get confused with. You say, well, that's opposite that, and that's opposite that, and you're using that same word, opposite, so that can confuse students. So that's opposite. Sometimes they just, instead of saying opposite, well, they say this is pointing to the hypotenuse. So that points to the hypotenuse, which is the longest side. That's opposite the angle, and this one's next to it. That's adjacent, which is next to it. And maybe they say, well, that one's left over. So here we go. That one's pointing to the hypotenuse. That's opposite the angle. That one's adjacent. Let's do this one. That one's pointing to the hypotenuse. That one's opposite the angle. And adjacent to the angle is that side there. And that's the first thing you learn in trigonometry. G'day, back again for part 2. So the second thing you learn in trigonometry is, you've already learnt that, you've learnt that's opposite, that's adjacent, that's hypotenuse. The second thing you learn is the 3 aspects that you're going to use over and over and over again, which is sine, cosine and tangent. So they're the 3 terms you use, and you might learn them one at a time. You might learn tangent first, you might learn sine first, you might learn cos first. I tend to teach all of them all at once so you can see how they're related, because once you've got the relationship, it's pretty easy. So sine, and you simplify learning those bigger words by just 3-letter words, and they usually have sine, cos and tan, and you don't refer to those so often for students anymore. You just go sine, cos and tan, and then you learn what the relationship is with this triangle. And the triangle is very simply, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cos is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tan, and I might move it down just a bit, tan equals opposite over adjacent. And that's the next thing you learn. And then they ask you to simplify this by just using letters. So they would say sine of the angle, so sine theta, and I probably should have the thetas in there, so sine theta, cos theta, tan theta. Sine theta equals O over H. And they get it simplified to that, so you're starting to learn an acronym. Cos theta equals A over H, and tan theta equals O over A. Okay, they then abbreviate it to this, and then they do one more abbreviation, which is SOH CAH TOA, and that's the acronym that's typically learned. So it's SOH CAH TOA. And once you've got that in your head, it's very easy to go, well, sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, cos equals adjacent over hypotenuse, tan equals opposite over adjacent. The thing that a lot of students forget when they're rushing is they forget where the theta goes. So you really need to say sine theta equals O over H, like I actually did there. So when they're rushing, they forget to put that in, and then they've got an answer which actually doesn't make any sense. So sine theta opposite over hypotenuse, cos theta adjacent over hypotenuse, tan theta opposite over adjacent. So SOH CAH TOA. There's different ways of remembering that, and I'm not going to go through any of the other ideas for it, but if you can remember that, that's a great start. So we'll have a look at a few in just a moment. G'day, back again. So having learned SOH CAH TOA, the next thing that you usually have to do is do that for all of these. So let's do that. So if you go sine theta equals, well, what's sine theta? Opposite over hypotenuse, so opposite over hypotenuse. And they get you to do that for everything. So let's do it for this one. You get cos theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse, so adjacent over hypotenuse. And then tan theta equals opposite over adjacent, so opposite over adjacent. And they get you to write that out a couple of dozen times so that you're in the practice and in the habit of looking for those things on a triangle. So let's do this one. So if we go sine theta, what does it equal? Opposite over hypotenuse, so this is the opposite, that's the hypotenuse, so it's 4 over 5. You've got to remember, you start from where the angle is. That's the opposite there, that's the opposite there. Okay, so cos, we're going to go cos theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse, and tan theta, so opposite over adjacent, so tan theta from here is opposite over adjacent. Once you've done that, and you've done it a few times, the next thing they do is they say, find out what the angle is, and they get to press, you get press buttons on your calculator. Now it depends on what your calculator is and what the functions are, but most of the time it's usually shift, sign, the fraction, press the equals button, and then you usually press the degrees, minutes, seconds. So if you press it for any of these, funnily enough, you get the same answer. So if you press this for this, you're going to get 51.34. Then you press the degrees, minutes, seconds button, and you get 51 degrees, and what have we got? 20 minutes and 24.69 seconds. Now usually you answer with just that. 51 degrees, 20 minutes, and that's usually it. So if you press it for any of these, you will get that answer, because you're looking at the same angle from a different perspective. So you get the same, you get this answer. Same if you press, it doesn't matter which one of these you press on your calculator. So if you press Shift Cos 3/5, you'll get 53.13, whoops, 0.13. Okay, and then you press the degrees, minutes, seconds button and you get 53 degrees, 7 minutes and 48.37 seconds. Now I didn't do that in my head, we've already done it before. So if you press Shift Tan 4/3, you'll get this. If you press Shift Sine 4/5, you'll get this. So you're looking at the same angle using different aspects of the triangle, but you get the same answer. G'day, back again. Part 4, I'm going to teach you a little trick now. Most students usually learn SOH CAH TOA. They get a question like this and they go, oh, what have I got to use? SOH CAH TOA, and think, I've got opposite over hypotenuse, oh, I have to use sine. They get to this one and they go, oh, what do I do? SOH CAH TOA, I've got to use cos adjacent over hypotenuse. Well, let's say you can't remember all that, and let's suppose you only remember tan. Let's suppose all you can remember is tan equals opposite over adjacent, and that's all you remember. You can still get by pretty easily as long as you can do Pythagoras. So you can just say 13 squared, take away 5 squared is this, and then you use tan. And you can use tan every single time just by using a little bit of Pythagoras and say, okay, well, what is this? 13 squared, take away 5 squared is here. This is the square root of 13 squared, take 5 squared. And in this case, that's the square root of 144, which actually equals 12. And you can say, I can figure that out by going tan 5/12, tan theta. Tan theta equals 5/12. Press Shift Tan on your calculator and you'll get theta equals 22.6, which equals 22 degrees 37. Now you could have done it by saying, okay, I'll go opposite over hypotenuse, press Shift Sine, and you still get the same answer. But we're assuming you can't remember sine, you can only remember tan. Let's do the same over here. This one works out exactly, this one doesn't. So here you've got 10 squared, take away 7 squared. So you're going to have 10 squared, take away 7 squared. So that's going to equal root 51. But the same rule applies. Okay, so again, we're stuck, all we can remember is tan. So we're going to go tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. And you press Shift Tan root 51 on 7 and you get the right answer. You'll end up with 45.57, that's a 7, which equals 45 degrees, 34 minutes. Now again, you could have used cos and said Shift Cos 7/10, but just in case, you can do that. That's one way around it. There you go. G'day again, back for part 5. So I've split this into 2 parts because this time what you're given is, you're given the angle and you're looking for a side. So in these 2 examples, the side will end up on top. So it's a multiplication will be the calculation. So let's look at this one. For this, you've got adjacent and hypotenuse. So adjacent and hypotenuse is cos. So we're going to write cos 40 equals x over 12. Now I said it was going to be a multiplication. That's because you're going to multiply both sides by 12 to leave x on its own. So we're going to have 12 multiplied by cos 40 equals x. And that's your answer. You just punch that in your calculator and you should get 9.19 centimetres. Pretty straightforward. So anytime you get the thing you're looking for on top, you're going to just move that straight over there and multiply straight across. Let's do the next one. Same sort of thing is going to happen. You've got opposite and adjacent. Again, we're looking from the angle. So this is going to be tan. So tan 20 is going to equal x over 10. So again, just like here, the 12 went up here, the 10 is going to come up. So we're going to get 10 multiplied by tan 20 equals x. It's just basic algebra. So if you do that on your calculator, punch it in, you get that equals, we're in centimetres, yeah, 3.64 centimetres, and it's pretty straightforward. We'll be back in a sec and we'll see what happens when x is on the bottom. G'day, back again for part B. So this time the x is going to end up on the bottom. So let's do this one. I've used the same diagrams, so it should be pretty familiar. So here, again, you have adjacent hypotenuse, so we're going to use cos. So cos 40 equals 9 over x. Now you've got x on the bottom. Could be a problem, but it isn't really. Basic algebra, multiply both sides by x and divide both sides by cos 40 means these two switch places. So when you end up with x on the bottom, you just switch those two around. So you'll end up with x equals 9 divided by cos 40. Punch that in your calculator and you end up with 11.75 metres. Okay, so pretty straightforward. You're just switching this with that, you're switching those two around. So let's do the next one. Again, this is tan, just like before. So we're going to be tan 20 equals opposite over adjacent, 7 over x. We've got x on the bottom, what do? We switch them around. So we get x equals 7 divided by tan 20. Punch that in your calculator and you get 19.23 and you're done.